Welcome to Bank Director's online training series on the topic of CEO evaluation. My name is Peter Thies. I'm a Managing Director with Meyer in the leadership practice. Today, we're going to talk about how to get the most out of your CEO evaluation process in a way that benefits the bank, the board, and the CEO themselves. A CEO evaluation can be used for many things. Most banks use it to determine compensation for the CEO's performance in the prior year. However, additional uses for the CEO evaluation would be to outline the CEO's developmental priorities so that they know what they can work on in their leadership as CEO. And finally, it can serve as a way to align the board and the CEO on those priorities for the CEO's development as well as priorities for the company's performance overall. The board typically evaluates the CEO, particularly for compensation planning. We suggest that you broaden the scope of the CEO evaluation process to include not just the financial metrics and the success of the company for compensation purposes, but also get into how they perform as a leader, what their leadership style is like, how they communicate, how they engage stakeholders, how they develop talent, how they develop strategy. It's a multi-pronged process. In terms of which committee conducts the CEO evaluation, that can vary from company to company. In some banks, the compensation committee is squarely accountable for that. In others, it might be a nom-gov committee, and in others, it might be the executive committee. Regardless of who is in charge of the CEO evaluation process, the important thing is that they are engaging the CEO in that process from the very beginning, before the year begins, during the evaluation period. The first step in a CEO evaluation process is to set the goals that will be used to assess the CEO. And that should be set at the beginning of the year and with the CEO, so there's alignment between the board and the CEO on those goals. In addition to metrics around bank performance that get included in a CEO evaluation process, there should also be data collected and feedback given on the CEO's performance as a leader. The CEO job is very complex and there are many aspects of it that need to be evaluated. One category of leadership performance in the CEO role is around strategy. How well do they set vision? How well do they engage the board in strategic planning? How clear is that strategic plan not only to employees, but to customers, to the marketplace, to investors? Another element of CEO leadership performance is around the organization. How well does it run? Does it run efficiently? Is it structured correctly to implement its strategy? Does it have the ability to innovate with new products and services? Do they have a robust digital strategy? These are the kinds of organizational elements that must be included in a CEO evaluation process. Another area to evaluate in a CEO's performance as a leader is around talent, and this is really important. This has to do with the strength of the leadership bench at the bank. Do you have people who can take on the CEO role in the future? Are you engaging your workforce? What's your engagement scores like? Do you have a retention problem? These are all the things around talent that must be considered. Another area to include in the CEO evaluation around the leadership performance of the CEO is around their personal leadership characteristics. Are they engaging? Do they communicate well? Do they manage stakeholder relationships well? Are they resilient, particularly if times go bad? These are the kinds of things that show up in public, and they're very important in the CEO role. When conducting the CEO evaluation, of course the board is going to want to use quantitative measures of the bank's performance, the usual financial metrics and other objectives and key measures. In addition, the board should collect qualitative data on the CEO's performance. Good is when the board fills out a survey and gives ratings and maybe some write-in comments about the CEO's leadership performance. Better is when directors are interviewed one-on-one, whether it's the full board or sometimes just the committee that is responsible for the CEO evaluation. Best is when direct reports to the CEO are included in the qualitative data. In addition to getting input from the board and potentially management team, a CEO evaluation process should include the CEO's own self-assessment against those categories that must be included in the evaluation process. To prepare for the CEO evaluation, the board should of course look at the sources of data available to them, including company performance data, audit reports, engagement surveys, etc. In addition, if they are preparing for an individual interview as part of the CEO evaluation process, the directors should think ahead about a balanced view of the CEO's performance, not only the things that they do well, but also their opportunities for improvement as a leader. The strategic planning process should be incorporated into the CEO evaluation process. Not only does it help to identify the strategic goals for the organization that the CEO is responsible for, but the board should also look at things such as the clarity of the strategic plan, the extent to which the board has been engaged in the strategic planning process, and how clear that strategic plan is to employees. In a CEO evaluation, there are different kinds of performance metrics to look at. Some are more short-term oriented, such as in-year performance. They should also include long-term performance measures, especially around strategy execution over a period of 2 or 3 years. There should be a balanced scorecard of those performance metrics, so it shouldn't be overly weighted just on liquidity or credit risk or any one of those categories. There should be a balance across all of them. When considering the weighting of performance metrics in a CEO evaluation, leading practice would suggest to not just look at one category, but to look at multiple categories in a balanced scorecard approach. For example, not just looking at creditworthiness or liquidity risk, but also things like industry compliance and regulatory concerns. Typically, the board evaluates the CEO on an annual basis with a mid-year check-in. For first-time CEOs or a CEO new to the company, a quarterly check-in process is not out of the question. When incorporating risk into the CEO evaluation, the board should look at least 4 factors. One is capital adequacy, another one is asset quality, a third is liquidity, and the fourth is market or interest rate risk. And with regulators, they should be treated as one of the many stakeholders of the company, not the primary stakeholder. At times, there are extenuating factors that might affect the CEO evaluation process, such as external events that are outside of the company's control. For example, COVID, which we all went through. Another might be geopolitical instability, which raises problems in markets that are outside the board's control. Having said that, the bonus pool is the bonus pool, so the board may not be able to change materially a CEO's compensation based on this evaluation, but they can consider to what extent it was out of the CEO's control. Once all the data is collected, the next step is to share the results. It's very important to think clearly and comprehensively about how the data will be shared. For some banks, there's a conversation one-on-one with the board chair or the committee chair. Leading practice would say that a preview copy is sent to the board chair and the committee responsible for the evaluation. And then at minimum, the results are shared with the full board, either for discussion or for information purposes. Then comes time to talk with the CEO about the results. Again, that can be one-on-one with the board chair or the head of the committee, and at times it can be with the full committee. Most important thing, regardless of the process you use, is that this is an open and honest conversation where the CEO believes that the feedback is balanced, the conclusions are valid, and that the board is supporting them in their development going forward. During the CEO evaluation process, the board should be prepared to answer some natural questions from the CEO. Having said that, if the board has prepared the process in a way that conforms to the leading practices of setting goals, having mid-year check-ins, and having balanced input, these questions will be answered. Typical questions from the CEO include, what goals will I be measured on? How will the data be collected? Who will be involved in the process? And very importantly, how will the data from the evaluation be used? The board can incorporate prior year CEO evaluations into the process by having a tracking mechanism to look at it from, say, 2 or 3 years in a row. It can be used for tracking progress on strategy implementation. It can also be used for tracking the CEO's developmental progress against their leadership performance. It's a great way to show that the CEO is increasing their value in a leadership role year over year. At times, the board will provide input to the CEO on other members of their management team. This is a good practice, but should be used with caution. One thing we always tell boards is, board meetings are not real life, so you're not really seeing the full picture of your management team members. You're seeing them at their presentation best. You're not seeing them as the leaders they are day to day. They shouldn't be expected to know what those leaders are like day to day. The CEO needs to tell them about that. When conducting management team evaluations, the CEO should seek out board perspectives on the management team. Having said that, the CEO might want to treat the board as one person giving feedback to an executive in a 360 feedback process and not overly weight the board's perceptions in the evaluation of the management team member. With respect to the board providing feedback on management team members, the board has a particularly important role in providing feedback on CEO successor candidates. A leading practice is for the board to have their own first-hand knowledge of CEO successor candidates above and beyond what the CEO tells them. This balances out the feedback, and it's important because the board is the one making the decision about the next CEO, not the incumbent CEO. In terms of what the CEO should share with the board about management team members, it's particularly important for them to go in depth on CEO successor candidates and then a higher level overview of the rest of the management team. It is good for the board to know about the management team in general, but the most relevant topic is the readiness of CEO successor candidates. The board will be interested in certain management evaluations, particularly on CEO successor candidates. What the board wants to know is, how ready are these candidates to take on the CEO role? And what kind of time frame are we talking about? The caution here is that this can get a little dicey for the CEO because they might want to not talk about somebody being ready next year, for example. I encountered two common misconceptions that directors have about their role in the CEO evaluation process. One misconception is that it's just about the bank's performance, not the CEO's performance as a leader in the top job. The second misconception that board members may have about their role in the process is that it's only about their performance last year. The critical component is to look at the development of the CEO as a CEO. So they should think that it's also developmental in nature, not just about the compensation package. As we conclude this training series on CEO evaluation, I'd like to offer a couple of takeaways. One is to use balanced criteria, not just looking at company financial performance. Another is to use qualitative as well as quantitative data, seeking input from board members, management team members, and the CEO's own self-assessment. The third is to make this developmental in nature. This is not just about determining the CEO's compensation, but also about supporting the CEO in their growth and development as a leader. Thank you for watching this video as part of Bank Director's online training series on the topic of CEO evaluation.